Hey folks, Randy Newberg here, and we are recording another episode of Hunt Talk Radio. And we weren't supposed to be filming or recording this today. We were supposed to be walleye fishing. My guest here is my son, Matthew. He's been on I don't know, what, this your fourth podcast?
Third? Three. Yeah, third, I think.
So Matthew's home. He darted back to Montana for a few days, and we were supposed to go walleye fishing today, but I pulled the boat out of the shop last night and looked at a rear axle, and man, I got a tandem axle trailer, and one of those is wobbling a little bit. So come to find out, got a bad wheel bearing, and so we're not walleye fishing today. What do you do on a hot August day if you aren't walleye fishing? You do a podcast. So, Matthew, thanks for joining.
Yeah. Well, I've been eating cake all morning, so that's been pretty enjoyable on my part. As is apparently tradition when I come back. Mom makes chocolate cake for me.
Yeah. And normally I get to lick the beaters when she makes it. But last night I was gone and I didn't get to. Anyone listening, and I know some people are smiling, when someone makes really good frosting for a cake, what do? You lick the beaters and you lick the bowl. You take a spatula around the inside of the bowl, and my wife will let me walk around the house for a day with a chocolate drop right on the end of my nose from licking the bowl or licking the beaters, or when I'm doing ice cream. When I eat ice cream, I lick the bowl, sometimes even in public, because I want to get all that chocolate syrup out of there. And it annoys her, so she doesn't even tell me if I have a big chocolate dot on the end of my nose. But anyhow, that's a diversion about what we're going to talk about today, but it's pretty important stuff. We're talking homemade chocolate cake with homemade frosting. Yeah. Breakfast of champions.
Yeah. I mean, I've had it for breakfast and lunch so far today. So. It's been a good day.
Oh, folks, thanks for listening. We're trying to crank out some podcasts this week because we hit the road next week. It's amazing. Hunting season's already in front of us. Today is actually the second day of archery antelope in Montana. But I've not been able to get out, trying to get so many things done before we hit the road for the real filming part that I don't know when I'm going to fill that antelope tag. I'm going to try, but I'm not sure when it's going to happen. But today, Matthew and I went through our Hunt Talk forum, and you guys do a great job of leaving us ideas and thoughts and questions out there. So we plucked a bunch of them off there. We plucked some off our Facebook page, the Randy Newberg Hunter Facebook page. And I think we got some pretty decent content here to create arguments about.
Yeah, I think we do.
Make some people get mad, scream and yell at their radio.
Yeah. We're going to save a few of them for later in the week, too, when we do the next one. But
yeah, the more politically slanted ones we're saving for the next podcast. Matthew said that he needs a little more time to really get the gist of the topic so he can get me all worked up, he said. So I'm giving him 2 more days to do his research. And then when we do that podcast, it's his job to make sure that I'm in a French-Canadian frenzy there, ready to scream and yell and call people names or something. But before we get into the topics, I better talk about the really great companies that make this podcast possible. One of them is Onyx Maps. You know that I've been using their map chips forever. Right now, they're in the midst of launching a really cool product. I've had the beta version of it all summer. It's called the Hunt app. And it is the whole new era of GPS is what they're calling it. And it really is that. And if you go out to onyxmaps.com and you use the promo code RANDY, R-A-N-D-Y, 16, you'll get a 20% discount off any of the Hunt app products. And I've been playing with it. And if ever there's somebody who's a stick in the mud, who does not adapt technology very easily, you're listening to them right now. It would be me. And what I've been able to to experiment with the new Hunt app, the beta version I had all summer, has been very eye-opening to me. There's going to be a lot of ways that I'll be using this, and over the next month, you're going to hear a lot about Onyx Maps from them, from us. We got a big promo we're going to be running with them starting next month. I think a lot of you are going to want to get in on that one if you like hunting. I can't tell all the details, but anyhow, onyxmaps.com, amazing product. The old don't leave home without it. Another one of our great partners is gohunt.com. They have the insider service, and right now they have a 30-day free trial that you go there and you get access to the entire insider system. You give them your credit card, and if you cancel within 30 days, no problems. But you're going to get to see all these drawing odds that we talk about that are just the most accurate drawing odds there are, especially in complicated states, Nevada, New Mexico, states that let you have multiple choices, and states that have very complicated, I guess I'll call them bonus point schemes. Just the draw odds at gohunt.com in the insider service are worth the price. And there's tons and tons of other stuff there. It's all these Western states that they focus on. They have unit analysis. They have it's hard for me to explain it all. I just say go do the 30-day free trial. And you can go to gohunt.com/hunt talk, HUNTTALK. So gohunt.com/hunt talk, and it'll take you to the 30-day free trial. Just hit the free trial button and you'll be ready to go. So, and then last, but certainly not least, is Orion Coolers. And here it is, late August. September, we're going to be living out of Orion Coolers in hot weather. I'll be in Utah, I'll be in New Mexico, I'll be in Arizona, and that's just between now and the end of September. And anyone who knows those states, it can be warm in August and September, and we're going to be living in camps, keeping our food cold, hopefully we have meat that we harvest that we're going to have to keep cold when we're out there. And the Orion Coolers are the ticket to do it. If you go out there, you will see what thought has went into these coolers and why they're so tough, so durable, why they perform so well. So orioncoolers.com, go there, and hopefully you'll be as impressed with them as I am. So with that, Matthew, we're about ready to get into the real substance of the conversation. And this isn't like CNN or Fox News here. This is real information. This is useful information. It's a political year, and I promise you I wouldn't talk about politics on this first podcast, but I guess I'm going to start with. But I don't know how people watch that stuff anymore.
Yeah, I don't either. I don't even have TV, and I still get tired of
it. But they have like 5 people talking at the same time. And it reminds me of wrestling. You know, you got to have a villain. You got to have a good guy and a bad guy. And then you got to have someone who screams and yells and acts very out of control so that the calm person looks normal. I mean, I hate to say it, but the mainstream big networks that cover most of the politics, I think they're partly to blame for the whole chaos of what we see in this political year right now. But that's not what this podcast is. Or we don't have 5 guys here all screaming and yelling at the same time.
No, we're going to keep it a little more toned down for this one at least.
Matthew and I have had some good political discussions in the last few hours, so we'll try to not let those interject or influence what we're doing here. Just a side note before we get started. We are on a test drive with some brand new podcast gear. We went and bought new headsets, new microphones, everything, because some of you have mentioned that you hear big peaks and valleys in the volume. Part of that is my lack of editing skills. We've started sending these podcasts out to a professional editing group, audio group. Thanks, Joe. Appreciate you contacting me. So hopefully that solves some of it. And then some of the background noise, the ticking and tacking, it was the type of mics we were using. When we're out on the road, though, we're going to bring those portable mics. So we're going to try do podcasts from every hunt that we're on this fall. And I hope that the real feel is worthy of the maybe production imperfections that you might hear along the way. So,
yeah. Well, that's actually a good transition to the first thing I wanted to talk about, which is basically the YouTube platform and what that allows us to do now that we don't really have a lot of the restrictions that broadcast TV brings along with it.
Yeah,
so,
for sure. You are the one who, you can talk all you want, Matthew. You're the one who came up with this idea.
Yeah. So there's a few parts that are going to go along with this. And like he was mentioning, part of that's going to be maybe doing a daily recap of the hunt in podcast form or maybe in video blog form.
Right. If we have time.
Yeah.
And all of this is qualified by, especially in August hunts. You know, you got to be up on the mountain before daylight. So if you got a 2-hour hike, that means you're getting up at 3:30 in the morning, hiking, and you get up there about 5:30, and then you stay till dark, and then you hike back out. You think I want to do a video blog every morning or every afternoon or every day when I'm that tired?
Yeah. Well, it seems like time is always the most valuable resource with where we're at right now.
Yeah. So Matthew's kind of in charge of this YouTube empire. Well, it's not an empire yet. So he's the one who gives all the instructions of, well, you got to do this, you got to do that. And I'm looking at the list of stuff he wants me to do this fall. I don't know how I'm going to get any hunting done.
It's nice being in the position where I just get to tell you what to do, though.
All right. I didn't mean to interrupt you, but
yeah. No,
don't be obligating me to the audience of things that we haven't talked about yet.
I mean, I can make promises here, right? And then you're obligated to go through with them.
Or they just are promises that won't be kept,
I guess.
So
yeah,
anyhow.
that's one of the things we're looking at, daily kind of check-in podcast. This might augment or possibly replace the daily hunt write-ups
Yeah, because we've been doing a lot of, I used to, and okay, folks, this is where I have to open up the curtains a little bit more. Back when we aired a wolf hunt in 2012, since then, I don't know how many hundreds and hundreds of death wishes my wife and I have received, but if you can imagine, my wife is home alone when I'm on the road, her and the dog or dogs, and she gets these crazy emails of people saying, oh, don't be surprised if your house burns down, or boys, I hope your dogs die, or, you know, just crazy, crazy stuff. So I used to do all of these live hunts out on Hunt Talk that was just a day by day, hour by hour as it was happening in the field. But the crazier the people and their comments, the more it concerned my wife to be telling everybody, hey, I know for sure he's out hunting today. So that's kind of why I dialed back the live hunt stuff out on Hunt Talk. It used to be some of the most popular threads we had. So our goal is, even if I don't have a connection this year, even if I don't have a way to do the Hunt Talk live thread, we're probably going to do it in a video format or a video style, because it won't take quite as long. And we're going to load those up to Hunt Talk when we get to a place where we have a connection and we can do it. So I don't know if it'll fully replace the old live hunt threads, and I hope you guys all understand why I try to be a little bit secretive about when I'm on the road, where I'm at, because it's unnerving when you're home alone and you get a flurry of 4 or 5 emails in a day that are just strange, unbalanced people wishing destruction upon you. So anyhow.
Yeah. So that's something we're going to try to do. We'll see. As he was mentioning, those may not necessarily be live, but might be a week or 2 weeks delayed to kind of hide the presence of being in or out. So that way people can still get an idea of what's going on and what it's like to be there in the moment, and have the updates without you having the knowledge of how the hunt's actually going to wind up, and still keep mom feeling safe, because without her approval, this whole thing doesn't last very long.
Yeah. I'm like all of you listening. I'm not the boss at my house. The humor or the joke at my house is when my wife says, "You're the boss," and she pauses and then says, "When I let you." But the other thing that maybe you're getting to this about how we're releasing the TV episodes are now starting to pop up on YouTube.
Yeah. I mean, that was one of the topics. We've got a few more things going on.
All right.
Yeah, we can go there.
Get to your topics.
Nah, that's a fine thing to talk about. So we're trying to get the episodes on YouTube shortly after they air. It's not going to be, the next day or anything, but it's going to be within two weeks or a month, something like that.
within a month. So. And part of that is you can imagine we have a network agreement, and the network says, look, we have responsibilities to our carriers. A carrier for the network would be DirecTV, Dish Network, the cable networks, that whatever content they air will be original exclusive content at the time it airs. So our contracts have some delays in when we can put it online on YouTube. So it'll be, I'd say, a month, and people will get to see it. Yeah. And the other thing is, and we were shooting a bunch of these yesterday, we do additional, what we call, how do we explain it? The main episode is the tent episode. That's what they're calling it in YouTube. Mm. And then around that, you have what's called hub content. And so if you watch our YouTube episodes, they're slightly different than they are on TV because no commercials. And then at the end, we have what are called annotations or annotated links that say, if you want to see the rifle scope ammo combination Randy used, click here. And it takes you to a video with all that stuff. So,
yeah. And one good example of that is the YouTube exclusive that we did.
Right.
A month ago?
A month ago.
Like that?
Yeah. 1st of July.
Yeah. And so we had a bunch of associated content with that. The gutless video, I think there was a rifle scope video.
There's a rifle and scope one. There was the gear we use for a day pack or a day hunt.
So handful of things like that. And we're looking to try and get more of that out there in the future. It's my opinion, and I think our sponsors share this, that when we do that, we can have a little more freedom in what we show in the episode. And then they get value by us being able to feature their products in the hub content.
Right. And give a deeper explanation about how, after 40 years of hunting, I've arrived at the equipment that I use for the application I have.
Right. And so we think it's good for everyone all around. We hope that all of our viewers out there also get a bunch of information out of it. And so hopefully it's a win for everybody involved.
Yeah. And one of the things that Matthew and I spend a lot of time going through our Facebook page and the Hunt Talk forum and my emails to try gather what are the pieces of information that we think are useful or that a lot of you are asking us about as it relates to these type of hunts. It might be like we just did one the other day about why I use the knives that I use for elk hunting, because I get asked that question a lot. We've done other ones about, what clothing set do I wear for an archery hunt compared to a rifle hunt? So anyhow, there is some method to how we've come up with the hub content pieces that we've been filming.
Yeah. And then the final thing that I'd like to highlight are just some of the YouTube exclusive type content that we can do.
Yeah.
Can I spoil a little bit of what's coming up?
I don't know. It depends on what you're going to tell him. We might have to edit this part out. If he tells you something that's top secret, he signed a non-disclosure agreement before we turned on the podcast.
Yeah. So the Legacy Sports sent you some shotguns.
Right.
And so we're hoping that we can do a little bit of, something a little outside of what we've shown on TV so far with
Right.
a couple bird hunts. We were hoping to film some of the walleye fishing, walleye filleting type stuff.
That got put on hold today.
That's not going to happen until the boat trailer gets fixed. So trying to branch out a little bit more and, show not just the flashy TV type stuff, but what we've done as just us being who we are.
Right. Yeah. And all of, the audience pretty much knows our show and our platform is big game hunting. But I would say as you were growing up, we did more bird hunting than we probably did big game hunting.
Yeah.
And you're more of the bird hunter of the family. Yeah. And I'm more of the big game hunter. Would that be fair to say?
Yeah. At least going out to the range, I'd stand out there and shoot sporting clays or play pigeons all day long.
Yeah. And when we go to the range, like the piece we filmed yesterday, Matthew loves going to the sporting clays range because he knows he's going to make me look like a fool. But so some of the content that you're going to see on YouTube is, and one of the funnest things you can do is go dove hunting, quail hunting. And when I went to college in Arizona, I did so much of that to the point where by my second year at Arizona State University, they called me and said, "Are you really serious about wanting to attend this university? Because your grades don't look like it." But there were just too many quail and too many doves to hunt. So this fall on my calendar, I have a trip to Arizona in September for their early season dove hunt. And that's not going to be a TV episode. It's going to be a YouTube episode. But I want to show people kind of a little bit about what formed my ideas about hunting, some of the experiences I had that have, I guess, made me be the way I am. And dove hunting is definitely one of those. I love to shoot them because I get to shoot a lot because I'm a bad shot. So to get my 15 dove limit, I got to shoot a lot. It's always fun to shoot a lot. I love to eat them. They're abundant. There's pretty much anywhere other than the northern latitudes, you can find doves in September. In Montana here, we usually get a cold frost before dove season opens September 1st, and they're already gone. So it's not something I get to do a lot of here. And so I'm going to go do that. This winter, I'm going to do a quail hunt, and that's going to be on YouTube. We're going to do some duck hunting this winter. That's going to be on YouTube. So to Matthew's point, there's going to be a lot of stuff that we do that are going to be YouTube only. They're not going to be on TV. And part of another place where we got some of these ideas was, again, I know some of you keep thinking, oh, he just does this to say so, but our Facebook page and our Hunt Talk forum, we get requests for, hey, do an episode on this, do an episode on that. And so we may not be able to get to it in the TV format, but now with the YouTube format, I think Matthew has the desire to see me work and hunt 6 months a year instead of 4 months a year. Is that kind of the goal now?
Well, it seems like you're taking the summers off as far as I can tell. So, but yeah, fishing, as a family, we did a lot of fishing growing up, and
yeah,
that's something else we can show. And
yeah, you used to, when you were a kid, our goal was 60 days a summer in the boat. Some days we met it, or some years we met it, some years we didn't. But I think your Little League baseball skills may have suffered because of it, but your fishing skills probably were enhanced to a high level.
Yeah.
So
that's really what we're looking for a lot of these YouTube exclusive type things, is just trying to give a look inside the rest of what we do. And hopefully you'll enjoy that.
Yeah, I think people will, just because that's what they do.
Yeah.
I would suspect most of the people who watch us on TV or follow us on any of the platforms do a lot of fishing, probably do a lot of bird hunting. You usually only have one elk tag or one deer tag. So if you're going to fill up your time out on the water or out in the woods, it's going to be other things. So.
Yeah. And I mean, at least if it was me having to go out and do 10 to 12 hunts a year, sounds like that would start feeling a lot more like work and a lot less like fun. And so this is, at least to me, this is something different and new, and at least as far as filming.
Right.
And so it'll hopefully revitalize a little bit of the show, and
it'll break up the, if you want to call it a grind.
Yeah.
It'll definitely do that. And those of you who watched early last month, watched Corey Jacobson and I on an archery elk hunt in Montana. Later this week, we're going to load that up to YouTube with a bunch of hub content. But if you watch that episode, you quickly dialed in on the fact that Randy Newberg would probably hunt grouse any place, anytime, anywhere, even if there's a big bull bugling right down the ridge. It's just how I'm wired. I don't know what it is about a grouse, but when I see a grouse, everything else is static. It just, it doesn't matter until either that grouse flies to some place where I can't shoot him or that grouse is in my bag. I'm in pursuit. And
even over antelope.
Yep. Oh boy, that's a toss up. I would go kill that grouse and then I would resume my antelope hunt. Let's put it that way. Yeah, a grouse hunt will interrupt most any pursuit I'm in. So, but that's just fun stuff. And hunting is supposed to be fun. You know, there's almost this mindset anymore that hunting needs to be painful, that it needs to be agony, that if you haven't been miserable, it's really not that fun. And yeah, there's a certain type of reward to that, but I want to focus as much on the just absolute joyful, smiling, this is all fun kind of activities. And YouTube gives us the platform to do some of that.
Yep. All right. So we'll move on to something a little more serious, a little more hotly contested. So that is Montana trapping ballot initiative. What is it? I-177?
Yeah, 177. Where to start?
Yeah. Well, give a little background of what exactly is the ballot, where did it come from, and what is the future of it?
Yeah. I think where it came from, I think this is the third time now that Montana's had a ballot initiative to outlaw trapping on public lands. And there's really two places it comes from. As one, there is an anti-trapping sentiment out there, just like there's an anti-hunting sentiment. But in Montana, we've had a few instances where out of laziness, ignorance, stupidity, whatever, some guy will go and break the law by setting a trap near a trailhead, near a trail, near a road. And in Montana, we have required setbacks from public places like that, trails, trailheads, roads. But just like every activity, you got some knotheads who are going to go and do something stupid. And what happens? Fido gets in someone's trap. They run over there and they get Fido out of the trap, and he's whimpering a little bit. And, you know, it hits social media. It makes the local newspapers. So you get some of that, and it's just it's just what we live in today's world. So this whole ballot initiative about trapping touches on so many issues that are relevant to conservation, relevant to hunting and what place hunting has in today's world, and how we're perceived, that I thought that the trapping ballot initiative would be a good example to kind of draw out some of those parallels, that even if they're not right front and center in your grill as a hunter today, they're definitely somewhere on the path that you're heading down, that you're going to encounter this. And I don't know what issues we want to break it out into, Matthew. We can talk about ballot initiatives as a general thing. We can talk about trapping as a general thing. We can talk about...
I mean, where I kind of want to focus this is on whether or not you think there needs to be more control over how trapping works. Like, do you think the controls as far as laws are currently sufficient and we need to just enforce them, or have trappers kind of hold each other to higher standards?
Right.
Or do you think that we would benefit from having more strict regulation maybe?
Yeah, boy, how much time do I have to answer all that?
We have a while.
So the whole idea of more laws, Montana trapping in every state is highly regulated. It's highly regulated in Montana. We've got there's laws and regulations, and then there's also voluntary and just things we do to try prevent problems. So we have trapper education courses. We have all kinds of things about laws and regulations of how close you can set to public places, how often you have to check your traps. So there's no shortage of regulations. The reality is, if you had every regulation feasible short of outlawing trapping, that's not going to, until trapping is outlawed, that's the only satisfactory outcome to some people. So do I think more regulation is going to help? No, I don't. It's kind of like a lot of things. Let's use hunting for an example. We have our share of knotheads and morons in the hunting world. And when they break a law, they poach, they do something, we always are quick to say, those aren't hunters, those are poachers. Well, you have the same thing in trapping world. And no matter what laws you passed in the hunting world, you're still going to have some people who operate a certain way. They're stupid, they're lazy, they're ignorant, they don't care about the future of the activity. They're more selfish, more worried about their own self than they are the future of the activity. And so I don't think any more rules and regulations are going to change that. Yeah. Just like they wouldn't in the hunting world.
Yeah. So one thing that I find interesting about this is that when I was in college, I dabbled in speech and debate, and pretty much every debate practice that I did or debate round, someone would bring up the idea that, hey, we need more restriction or more guidance or more laws on any given activity. And the one half of the debate was about that, and the other half was, no, the status quo is fine. There are already controls in place. We just need to do a better job of enforcing or following them. And so it's interesting to me to just see this play out in real life instead of hypothetical debates that I saw in college all the time.
Yeah, I mean, it's right at the crux of the gun control debate.
Right.
You know? If you're going to commit the world's greatest crime of taking somebody else's life, is a law that says you can't buy a firearm on Sunday, you think that's going to stop somebody who has so little regard for the law that they'll commit the worst act in the world?
Right.
So it doesn't just play out hypothetically like in a speech and debate class. It doesn't just play out in trapping. It plays out in everything, where some people think that the better solution is more regulation. Mm-hmm. In the case of trapping, it's not about more regulation. It's just people want to see the end of trapping. And
so there is clearly some sort of public image issue. Mm-hmm. What is your solution to help trappers recover the image, and if not put it into a positive light, at least kind of dispel the negative stigma around it?
Yeah, it's a hard one, because it's been this tide against trapping has been growing for a long time. Some lessons to be learned from it, if you're in the hunting world or even the angling world, is that the smaller you are as a percentage of the population, the greater the impact of one bad apple in your community. And I think trappers, as a general rule, are probably even more of loners or soloists than hunters are. And trappers, and this is just based on growing up in a trapping family, growing up in a trapping community, and doing a lot of trapping myself, trappers have a tendency to say, oh, it's none of my business. It's none of my business. Okay, that guy's breaking the law. That guy's a poacher. He got caught. Oh, well, I'm not going to say anything. It's just the makeup of who trappers are. And they're probably even that way more to a degree than hunters are. But if there's some lessons to be learned from this is, if you don't think that some guy breaking the law or some guy doing something stupid is not your business, whether you're a hunter, whether you're a trapper, just look at where Montana trappers find themselves today. I mean, if you had to pick any state in the union that you thought there would be a anti-trapping ballot initiative, I bet you not many people would have thought Montana because of our rich hunting and fishing heritage. So the lesson to me is your image matters, at least to the people. And this ballot initiative is going to be decided by the people in the middle. It's not going to be decided by the trappers on one side and the anti-trappers on the other. It's going to be how well can hunters or trappers convey their relevance to the voter. And trappers have been terrible at that. There's a reason why trapping is still around, because all of our fish and game agencies, everybody who makes these rules and regulations realizes there are a lot of conservation values to trapping. And so they keep it as part of the management tools they have. If you go read all the work about the North American model of wildlife conservation, trapping, if you read the full 60-page document that John Organ and Shane Mahoney and others put together, there's a lot of discussion about trapping in there as a relevant conservation tool. But we in the trapping world have done a terrible job of painting any relevance or any value to what trappers do.
Can you expand on the benefits to conservation that trapping has?
Yeah, I mean, it doesn't matter.
Putting you on the spot here.
Right. So many people will, and I can just use some examples and everyone will say, well, Randy, you're cherry picking the example. And maybe I am. And some people will cherry pick the example of why they don't like trapping. So if you go out to our YouTube channel, there's a video out there about me muskrat trapping in February of 2015. In 2 weeks, I went out and I caught 300 muskrats. And you think about catching 300 muskrats in 2 weeks. That tells you there are a lot of muskrats in that area, because I had to do it before work. It wasn't like this was my full-time all-day job. And the place I was trapping was on a spring creek where the landowner had spent lots and lots and lots of money restoring this old spring creek that had been bombed out by the prior owner. And he restored the banks. He did everything. And now it's become some of the most amazing waterfowl, pheasant, deer, and fish habitat anywhere in our valley. Well, the muskrats get in there, and in the winter, when a lot of the ponds freeze, the muskrats try to head to the nearest open water. So since this is a spring creek, the muskrats were in there just lousy thick. And what they do is at water line, they start digging these little tunnels and these little shelves along the bank. And then they sit in the tunnel or on the shelf, and they start eating the roots of the grasses, the dead grasses. They start eating the roots from the bottom underneath. So they dig the tunnel at water level, and if you ever look at how soil is, the roots are way, way down in there. While they're doing that, they're killing the grasses, and the banks start eroding and sloughing in back into the stream. So this deep, winding spring creek all of a sudden again is starting to get washed out because of the muskrat damage and the way that they erode the banks. So what's the conservation value of me going out there and catching 300 muskrats? It retains the quality of this long stretch of spring creek for deer, for everything, for whatever lives there. And so you could, beaver, it might not be a conservation value for people to go and trap beaver that are flooding. I mean, how many times here in Bozeman have I caught beaver in city limits when you've been with me or you've known me to get called? A lot. People love beaver until they come and chew down all those $150 silver maples they planted last year, and they flood their basement. Like the one person told me, I love the beaver, but only on the Discovery Channel. I show up and her entire yard is flooded because of a beaver. So is that a conservation value? No, but people definitely change their ideas about trapping. When the beaver plugs their irrigation ditch or chews down what was a beautiful grove of aspens or whatever. So I could go on and on about those conservation values.
Okay.
Whatever it might be, whether it's trapping of canines, trapping of whatever. And it's very similar to the conservation values that we'll talk about when we're trying to discuss how hunting plays a role in conservation. But there are some people who they don't really care. That's not the conservation is not high enough up their priority list that's a message that means anything to them.
Mm-hmm. So where can people go to find more information about conservation or the benefits of trapping to conservation, or just the benefits of trapping in general?
Yeah, I mean, the National Trappers Association has all kinds of stuff. If you Google them, there's all kinds of things about the conservation benefits of trapping. And you could ask any wildlife biologist, you could ask game managers. They will give you a lot of very valuable things that trappers do that a lot of it we don't even see, because trappers try to fly under the radar as much as anybody. And it just, it's a hard message to sell to the general public because we're so disconnected from the natural world that, and, it's just the image people have of trapping. And it's very often, if not very often, maybe even always, someone who has no firsthand experience of trapping, or maybe no second, third, or even tangential experience as it relates to trapping. They have an image of how it happens. And I talk to a lot of hunters who say, you know what? I don't really care if that trapping goes away. I'm not going to die on the stake for trapping. Like, okay. And some of you listening right now are hunters. And I know that there are some who say, you know what? I'm a bird hunter. And I don't think those trappers should be out there because my dog might get his toes pinched in a trap. It happens. I hear it all the time. I hear a lot of hunters who say, I don't believe in trapping. Okay. And they're the ones who say that don't have any background or experience in trapping. So I don't say this, but maybe I should start saying it, is I want to say, all right, so you're basing your judgment on trapping's relevance without having any firsthand experience. You don't understand it. You admit that you've never done it. You've never seen how it works or seen the values it has, but you've formed your opinion. So when someone completely disconnected from hunting, say bird hunting or whatever hunting it is, comes along, who's completely disconnected from the activity, who has no first, second, third, or even tangential experience by which to understand hunting, do you want them to judge hunting based on that? Because that's how a lot of hunters who don't support trapping are judging trapping. I'm not saying all, but a lot are. Mm-hmm. And if we want to just talk about a strategy standpoint, if you look at this anti-animal, I don't know what you'd call it. Let's just call it anti-trapping, anti-hunting movement. They are employing tactics and strategies that are very much like any public relations campaign, any political campaign, or any military campaign for that matter. You find the smallest and weakest portion of your enemy. You bring massive force to that small portion of the enemy, which trappers are the smallest in the hunting, fishing, trapping world. And you go and annihilate them. And they're out of your hair. Then you move on to the second smallest, and you wait your opportunity until you have the right battlefield, and you go after the second smallest. So maybe that'll be archery hunters after trappers. Okay? You got rid of the archery hunters. All right? What's number 3 as you go from smallest to largest? Okay. Maybe that'll be hunters. And then after that, maybe it'll be fishermen. So I try not to spend all my time worrying about what the anti-hunting world is doing or what the anti-trapping world is doing. I instead want to focus on a positive message of my activities so that the people in the middle have a better understanding from which to make their decision. And so I would caution any hunter who says, "Oh, I'm against trapping," or I hope those trappers lose that ballot initiative. I'm not saying that there aren't some stupid things trappers have done. They have, as some individuals, just like there's some stupid things certain hunters have done. But just kind of be careful what path you're heading down there, because someday you'll be looking straight in the eye of that same mindset, that same disconnected part of society that part of society that's disconnected from the natural world, who looks at your activity with no context by which to measure its values and relevance, and you'll find yourself in the same shoes.
So I'm not a big fan of slippery slope arguments, which is
right. Me
pretty
neither.
much what
I
that
hate
is.
slip, and that's why I didn't even throw it out there.
But how would you be able to convince, say, a hunter who was out pheasant hunting or something, and their dog got caught in a trap and maybe had its leg pinched in one?
Right.
How would you convince them that the benefits of trapping outweigh the damage that was dealt personally to them and their pet that they probably love dearly?
Right. I in a lot of instances, I don't know that you could. It's and the reason I say I don't know that you could provide an argument, because it will be trying to give a factual argument to address emotional feelings. Mm-hmm. Facts are not very good at bringing down emotional barriers. It's just the way it is. That is a reality of communication. But for the person who uses that, and I've had a Facebook discussion recently where someone said, "Hey, I'm a bird hunter, and I don't think I should have to worry about my dog getting caught in a trap." Okay, I get that. So does that mean the entire public land sphere in America, everybody else leaves so that someone can be a bird hunter with their dog? No, that's just not practical, and that's really not what the person's asking either. There are some risks that are out there that are part of having a multiple use, part of being in the wild. What if your dog gets in a porcupine? Are we supposed to go kill all the porcupines? No. What if your dog gets rabies from a raccoon? Are we supposed to go kill all the raccoons? No. There are things that trappers do that are, you can never eliminate the likelihood completely. I mean, there's no 0% possibility, but you do everything in your power to eliminate it. I've been trapping for however many years. I've never had a dog in a trap, ever. There's things you can do. The first part is where you set your traps. Go to places that people with dogs aren't going to be, whether they're people walking their pets or people hunting with dogs. That's the easiest way, is just don't be in an area where there's much likelihood of conflict. The other part is there's certain trap tensions. You can make your trap spring with a certain amount of weight having to be placed on the pan. There's just a lot of things. You check your traps regularly. I mostly, if I'm trapping and it's going to be a canine or feline type thing for bobcats or coyotes or fox, I'm just about always on private land, just because with my profile, yeah. Let's face it. If I caught somebody's dog, it would be way bigger news than if some non-TV guy caught somebody's dog. So I have to really think it through about where I go and set a trap. So there's just a lot of things that, besides the regulations that require you to do it, there's a lot of things you do as a trapper and how you trap, where you set, what kind of baits or scents you use, what time of year, just stuff like that of how you do it. So again, though, that's not going to help the guy whose setter got his toe pinched in a trap. And you'll hear this argument about, oh, someone's dog got killed in a trap. Newsflash. No leg hold trap is going to kill a dog. I tell people it's the equivalent of slamming your finger in the car door. It'll hurt, and you'll say, ouch. But it's probably not going to break your fingers. It's not going to kill you. And that's what a leg hold trap is designed to do. It pinches across the pad of the animal and restrains them there. That's how a leg hold trap works. So when I read people say, oh, my neighbor's hunting dog got killed in a trap, instantly my BS meter starts vibrating. Tells me that person doesn't know anything about trapping and they're just repeating the barroom story. So I'm not saying that some stupid idiot isn't doing something illegal, where they're putting a conibear trap, which is an underwater trap designed mostly for beaver, and go and set it on land. That's against the law in most states. I'm not saying some people aren't doing that against the law, but that's just, again, if someone does something stupid against the law and they're part of your community of people, you need to call them out. And I don't care if it's a trapper or a hunter or an angler or whatever. And so I hope in the discussion we're having here that those of you who hunt are listening to this saying, you know what? I better take note of what the trappers are going through right now. If I've got people who are breaking the laws, I got people that are skirting around the law, that are trespassing, that are shooting up property, doing stupid things, I better call them out. Because it is going, if I don't think it's my business today, it's going to be my business someday.
So then would you suggest maybe hunters who don't actively go out and trap, maybe get familiar with some of the main regulations so that if they see something going on that they can report it to game wardens?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. I think if you are a bird hunter, and I know someone say, well, I shouldn't have to do this. If you're a bird hunter, know how a trap works so that if your dog steps in a trap, you can easily release them. Or if you're out there and you see something that's not right, you can call the game warden. And there's not a lot of differences between hunting and trapping when you look at it. Probably some of the best hunters I know were trappers. Most all the trappers I know are very good hunters. It's just a different way of how you interact with the natural world.
So do you feel that hunters and trappers have a moral obligation to report anytime they see something breaking the law, like trespassing?
I do. I either call the landowner or I call the Fish and Game Agency. I have no tolerance. And I understand that people will make a mistake, or, they traveled to this state and they thought the rule was the same in the state they live in. I get that. I understand that. And I can't say that it won't someday happen to me, that I won't make a mistake out of ignorance. But if I do, I'm going to have to fess up and accept that I wasn't paying attention. And I don't know how else to say it, but the image that every one of us conveys is part of the image of hunting. But to your point, Matthew, I think that if hunters don't learn the lesson that they can see from watching trappers and how society's viewing trappers, I hope they learn the lesson. Otherwise, they're going to learn the lesson themselves, is that you can have no tolerance for bad behavior. And if someone's doing something wrong and it's out of ignorance, you know what? That'll get sorted out by the warden or the court. But there's just no way that we as a society, or that our society, is going to tolerate we as a community doing stupid things. That's the way it is. So all of you listening, if, like I said earlier, if you got a buddy that's doing something stupid, you can't have any tolerance for it, because that becomes your problem once society forms its vision and its image of who hunters are, just like they have about trappers.
Yeah.
But before we get off the Montana trapping initiative one, I just want to talk about, I call it ballot box biology. I think anytime, and I've never voted for a ballot initiative in my life because I hate them, even though it might be an outcome that I would have tried to obtain legislatively, I won't vote for it as a ballot initiative because I think it completely undermines the entire notion of a representative republic, representative democracy like we have in the United States. Why do we even have elections then? Why do we have represented people? Why don't we just make every issue a general election? Everyone gets to vote on every topic as a popularity contest. Well, the reason we don't do that is the founding fathers on the federal side said, you know what? We need some sort of control to keep, I think they called it the tyranny of the majority, from overriding the rights of the minority. And so they set up a system like we did with 3 parts of our government, that even in the congressional/legislative side, we had one part of it based on geography, one part of it based on population. It's everything about ballot initiatives, in my mind, are bad, no matter what the outcome is. And you might get what you want through a ballot initiative today, but the more we use that process, the more you're just opening yourself up that someday you're going to be on the losing end of that stick. And if it's that complicated of an issue that it takes us years to sort through it, well, maybe it's that complicated and we just need to spend a year or 2 or 4 years sorting through it, rather than just say, oh, I got the answer. Here's a 4-sentence ballot initiative. That'll solve it.
But at the same time, can't the elected representatives just get something wrong?
They can, but
that's in my mind, that's really what the ballot initiatives are meant for, is when the representatives are just not in tune with what should be happening.
Right. And that's what I believe that's what it was meant for, but that's not how it's used today. So look at ballot initiatives in Colorado. They lost spring bear hunting, not for any biological reasons, no population reason, nothing. Arizona lost trapping. California has lost hound hunting, all kinds of other things. Oregon has lost all kinds of things. Not because the elected people don't get it, not because the scientists and the biologists are wrong, but just because one group of people wants to place their value system on another group of people. To me, that's really what ballot initiatives are, is I'm in the majority and you need to adopt my value system, whether it relates to how we interact with animals, how we interact with whatever it might be. It's ballot initiatives are like the ultimate placing one person's value system on someone else. And I don't like it. And if you think about it in just the context of conservation and hunting and fishing and trapping, do we want the ballot box? Why would we need a biologist? Why would we need a commission? All we need is ballot initiatives and a bunch of game wardens to enforce what the ballot initiatives tell us. And that's why I call it ballot box biology. I hate it. So anyhow, that's Randy's dissertation on initiatives.
Yeah. So in summary, you don't like ballot box biology, or,
That's a summary. Yes.
Yep. One other thing I'd like to just mention quickly, we were talking about, we need to make sure we start policing ourselves. I'm pretty sure every state has a hotline that you can call to report issues. Right. I think Montana's is 1-800-TIP-MONT.
TIPMONT.
Yep.
I think most all of them have something like that.
So just wanted to bring some awareness to that.
Yeah. One other guy on Facebook asked me this question, and it's a it's a very relevant question. He said, "Look, I don't come from a trapping world. I hunt, and I listen to all your stuff, and I like how you push the envelope. But you talk about how we are sometimes we let certain things be called hunting, and it punches a hole in the bigger boat, and we're sinking the boat by not standing up against the bad actors or standing up against the things that give us a bad image." And he said, "So under that context, tell me why trapping, why should we hang on to trapping if it gives us such a bad image?" Well, that's a really good question. It's a very good question, I think. And my answer to it is probably isn't going to be the answer some people want to hear. My answer to it is that done legally, done regulated in the manner that it is, trapping has a very high conservation value. Some of the other things that we talk about as giving us a bad image in the hunting world, and I think he used high fences as the shooting penned animals as the analogy to maybe trapping, is that last I checked, there was nothing in the North American Model of Wildlife Conservation research that talks about pen shooting. There's no, that I can find anyhow, no conservation values provided by pen shooting. We introduce disease by pen shooting a lot of times to our native wildlife. Trapping in a lot of instances helps lower the likelihood of disease. We end up polluting our genetic purity when we introduce red deer that escape from high fence pen shooting operations or certain other species. So I think you got to look at it in that context. And I don't know that I could convince all the hunters of the world that they should stand up and say, hey, trapping has its place. And if they don't, I get that. I understand that. But I'm certainly not going to back away from it just because it's an easy target. Because let's face it, right now, maybe trappers are outnumbered 500 to 1 in this battle. Well, the next battle might be bow hunters. They might be outnumbered 200 to 1. And then after the bow hunters, it might be just hunting in general, and they might be outnumbered 50 to 1. So kind of be careful about how you judge someone else today, because you might be getting judged in the same way a year, 5 years, 10 years, 20 years from now.
All right. So stepping back to kind of the start of this is probably some bad actors in the trapping world.
Guaranteed.
Are really at fault for putting basically the entire group in negative light, right?
Absolutely. That's right. There's the best 2-sentence way to explain it. Is if you don't give the other side ammunition, they can't come and fight you in a war.
So that brings us to the next point, which is this study that you were telling me about.
Yeah.
You want to give a little background and maybe one or two highlights of it?
Sure. So there's a study that I had the privilege of getting a little bit of advance information on. It's probably going to be released here in the next month or so. There was a conference called about this study earlier this month, and it's a study about attitudes and opinions that society holds related to hunting. And I think this time, when this study comes out, it is going to really be an eye-opener to hunting. And the real question becomes, are we going to circle the wagons and dig in trenches and defend what we're doing? Are we going to look at the data and say, wow, that's how people perceive us? How can I change the way they perceive us? What can I be doing that changes the way people perceive us? And it's... when I heard some of the points that are going to come out in that study, a lot of it confirmed what my gut was already telling me. But now we have it in hard data. We have it in a study that is scientifically conducted across a large population by people who are trained in conducting studies related to hunting and fishing and public opinions. I think when this information comes out, I don't think hunters are going to have as much tolerance for bad actors as they do today. I'll just use some examples. I'm in this TV world. If you can't accept being held to a higher standard of behavior, then don't be in the TV world. Don't be a writer. Don't be a blogger. If you think that you're being picked on, if you think that it's not fair, that, oh, gee, I shouldn't lose my position in this media world because I'm a media person. I should be able to commit this violation and get some forgiveness or whatever. I think when people see this information, maybe I shouldn't say I think. I hope when they see it, they look at the data and say, you know what, this is a wake-up call. Here it is right in front of us in a black and white, in pie charts and graphs that shows us where the future of hunting is heading if we don't pay attention to what this information says. It's going to be that simple. And a lot of it is the communication of hunting. Because society wants to know our motives. They don't really care in most instances about a lot of the things we talk about. If you talk about, oh, I hunt for conservation values, that might be important to us, and it is important. But when you're messaging to the non-hunting society, not the anti-hunter, but the non-hunter who really is,
generally
open,
okay with hunting,
right?
But
They'd
may
be
not
okay
do
with
it
hunting
themselves.
in certain situations. They don't really care about, they have some care about conservation, but they don't have it to the degree and to the understanding that we as hunters do. We better have a better message, a stronger message that is more relevant to their priority system. Because in this study, and anyone who, I guess if you've been sleeping under a rock for the last year since Cecil the Lion happened, I think about a year, just about a little over a year ago, there has been this huge uproar where anyone who doesn't like hunting wants to hang the tag of trophy in front of it. And it's been very effective messaging on their part. And it forms the opinions that some people have of hunting. A lot of people don't even understand that hunting is regulated. I think in this study, one of the snippets I pulled out of there or heard was like 6 out of 10 students believe that hunting results in extinction of species. They're just all kinds of things. And then you look at the things that are positive. I think the numbers will show that 70% of people, whether they eat meat or not, they approve of hunting for food. There's certain species that they don't approve of hunting for food. Mostly predators, bears, and certain bird species. The way that they see the image of hunting and how we conduct ourselves is they are negatively impacted by it. And, we've had some discussions about this on the podcast in the past about the social media picture of the typical hero shot. Here's a guy with his bull or buck or duck or whatever it is, his fish. That doesn't play very well. Pictures of dead animals to the non-hunting world it doesn't convey the same message to them that it does to those of us within the community. And so this study, I haven't seen all of it. I've just met with some of the people involved and got feedback on the big conference that was held about it last month in Georgia. But I think it's going to cause people to think about their messaging, their image, the fact that every one of us are an ambassador for hunting.
Well, at least how I see it, there are two main strategies that people are going to employ. They're either going to actually take a look and say, hey, we need to shape up. And if I see a buddy post something on Facebook that puts hunters in a bad light, say, try to rein them in, tell them, hey, this isn't good for the sport. Or they're going to go the opposite method and say, oh, if people don't like it, that's their problem. Just kind of put the blinders on and charge straight forward.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, unfortunately, the loudest mouths are going to be the ones who put the blinders on, dig the trench and say, shut up, don't tell me what to do. Mm-hmm. You know what? I'm going to say it right now. That's selfish. If you have a concern about the future of hunting, putting the blinders on and saying, that's just how I am, and if you don't like it, don't watch. Or if you don't like it, unfriend me or whatever. You know what? That might make you feel good. That might let you go down to the bar and say, boy, I told them. But that is selfish, because this data is going to show that is very negative for the future of hunting. And if we don't adapt, I mean, you think about how quickly society is changing. And if we think that the image and the methods of communicating today should be the same methods we used 20 years or 30 years or 40 years or even 5 years ago, we're crazy. We're going to get our teeth handed to us. It's that simple.
Yeah, just putting the blinders on doesn't solve the root cause.
No.
Fun story I was telling you about a few days ago, when I was in Pennsylvania for work, they were having elections for city council or mayor or something. And one of the platforms was that they wanted to get up and they wanted to address the root problems of the city I was in that was facing some hard economic times. Mm-hmm. The main competitor to that person wanted to sue the Census Bureau to revise their numbers so that they could continue to get federal funding, and effectively just ignore that there were problems and just try to put a Band-Aid over it and hope it goes away.
Right.
And this is not something that you can really Band-Aid over.
No, it's not. And it's going to be very interesting to see, I mean, because I operate in this sphere, no one forces me to produce TV or produce a podcast or have a big website or have a big YouTube channel. So I think this survey is going to cause some people to look at how we communicate. A lot of this survey is going to be, the communications is going to be a critical part of how we adapt. And having been in this now going on my 9th year, I can see there are going to be some platforms that can adapt easily, some platforms that are already there and are doing the things that are helpful, and there are some that are just not going to be able to do it. And that's going to create some conflicts. That's going to create some, well, who are you to tell me, or blah, blah, blah. I don't know how we're going to handle that as a community.
How are you personally going to handle that as far as the show goes? Are you going to, for example, not worry so much about the end, grip and grin type thing? Mm-hmm. Or are you going to focus more on the meat or the conservation in the show? Or what's your plan for this?
Yeah, and I mean, this is a good season for people to see how I'm going to handle it, because I'm looking at the whiteboard up there. We did 10 hunts last year, and only 5 of them resulted in a tag being filled. The other 5 are trying to tell a story about hunting as an endeavor, as an activity that has so many other values to it. Now, people that audience that's trained to just watch outdoor TV for the last 5 minutes where there's a kill shot, that audience might say, Newberg, we are tired of you. If you aren't going to start killing some stuff, don't waste my time. That's fine. If that's where certain parts of the segment of the audience is, fine. I'm not changing what I do to try to satisfy that. And it's just who I am as a person. I mean, I want to be telling a story about something I'm passionate about, hunting, which is not just about the end result of a dead animal. So I think if people read my stories on Hunt Talk, if they watch our YouTube stuff, where we certainly are straying away from feeling confined or required to shoot something in every episode. And I'm thankful that, you can't have these platforms and distribute this content if you don't have sponsors, backers, people who support you in telling the story the way you do. So there's multiple parts of how the messaging gets changed. And it's going to be the messengers themselves. It's going to be the message itself. And it's going to be the ad agencies and the companies that fund the messaging. Mm-hmm. And for me, I mean, I always try to have, if you look at our production book, there's always a segment in there about the conservation of the landscape and a segment about conservation of that species. Now, it may not always fit. It may not always, we shoot it and we talk about it, but it might not make the final cut. And I can look at my YouTube page and whether good or bad, the visual media doesn't gain, when we do pieces about conservation of landscapes or conservation of species, it doesn't get that many views. If we say, boy, we shot a really big elk, it gets tons and tons of views. So part of that is just inherent to visual media. Part of it is inherent to, I think, how when we consume media as a society, we are looking to be entertained. We are looking for a high, a low, an up and a down. It's how we're trained. So
the people who are looking for hunting TV shows might be conditioned to, watch for the last 5 minutes to see the kill shot, or they might be conditioned that if they don't really care about the kill shot, there's no point in really watching the outdoor TV episode. So
right.
We might be in this awkward position where we're trying to convince people who have either moved away from outdoor TV or never started watching outdoor TV that we're providing them something of interest and of value. So it's an interesting place to be in, and we've got some work to do to really get it out there.
Yeah, it is. And that's one of the things this survey talked about, how there's such high approval for the food aspects of hunting. And I mean, last night we ate fish that we'd caught.
I ate a lot more than you did.
Right now, thawing in the sink is some Sitka blacktail burger that we're going to be making lasagna out of. The food aspect is super important to me. So what you're going to see this year, and we shoot it just about every hunt, but sometimes you don't fill a tag, so you can't show the quartering or the packing out of an animal because you didn't fill a tag. But on almost every hunt, we bring with us meals that are prepared from prior animals we've taken. So we're going to start talking about some of that also. I just think it's going to be imperative for hunting communication to start talking about our use of it for the food aspects also. And it doesn't mean we make apologies for the fact that, all right, there were 3 bulls standing there and I shot the biggest bull. I do. Every hunter do the same thing. Don't make apologies for it. It's just, since time began, that's how hunters have been doing it. And I'm not going to make any apologies for the fact that when I shoot a bull or a buck, I do bring the antlers home. And I do European mounts. And there's my shop is stacked full of them because they all have a memory to me. And I want to utilize every bit of that animal that I can. And if some people want to call that trophy hunting because we hunt the male species, not the female as the most part. Everybody knows that whether you're in agriculture, ranching, whatever, if you want the herd to sustain or grow, you harvest the males, not the females. And if everybody says, well, we want full utilization of the animal, okay. You want me to leave the antlers and the hides and the capes out in the field then? Because when you want to hang a tag on me of this negative connotation called trophy hunting, just because I kept the antlers, well, you're giving a disincentive for me to fully utilize everything about the animal. Mm-hmm. And so there's going to be times where, you be adaptive and you be smart about what the information tells you. But there's also going to be times where you just have to say, you know what, inherent to what I do, there is an inherent misunderstanding of a disconnected urbanized society to those who are trying to stay connected by procuring their food through hunting or fishing or gardening or whatever it might be. So there are going to be times where there's not a perfect smoothing over of these issues. But if we're going to just, as you said, put the blinders on and dig the trench, circle the wagons, whatever you want to call it, pretty soon we're going to find ourselves circling the wagons and we're going to run out of supplies. Yeah. It's going to be a war of attrition and we are going to lose.
Yeah. Well, I'm sure when that study finally gets published, we'll have more discussions about it. But I think we're getting close to the end of what we have time for right now.
We are?
I think so. We've been at this for well over an hour.
Really?
Yeah.
Huh. I must have been doing too much storytelling along the way.
So we have a few more topics that I was looking to get into, but I think we'll save those for next week.
What are they?
The big ones are going to be the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service setting their own policy in Alaska.
Oh, yeah. That's almost a podcast in itself.
Yeah.
Oh, and for those of you who don't know, what Matthew just mentioned is the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service controls the land management of a lot of Alaska. I think it's over 70 million acres. And they just issued some new rulings this month that say how predators, bears, and other species can be harvested. And between now and the next podcast, be thinking about, do we really have a state-based system of wildlife management like we've always said? Or when do we start crossing that threshold where it becomes a federal oversight model? And that Alaska issue highlights that. It also highlights when I give you the data of what the responses were during the comment period. And when you see how hunters got steamrolled, like you can't even believe, we're talking about a factor of, I don't know, I'd guess 20 to 25 to 1 in the comment period. It shows how bad we are at the game of public comments, engagement, and involvement. We might be really good at going down to the bar and pissing and moaning and whining and sniveling and telling our buddies, oh, blankety blank this, blankety blank that. That's not solving anything. And when I hear people say, oh, they don't listen to me anyhow, so I'm not going to write any comments or I'm not going to call or email, that kind of becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. And so, yeah, we'll save that for the next podcast because that's got way too many tentacles.
Yep. The other big one that I had on my list that we'll put off to the next is the ability to use suppressors or silencers in Montana now.
You don't, what? Huh? I can't hear you. Huh? You don't want to talk about that one now?
No, I think we're going to try to wrap up. So the last thing I want to cover is I want you to tell a few stories.
A few stories?
One story, we'll say.
About what?
Let's go with something from your childhood.
Oh, my goodness.
I always really enjoyed these, and I think pretty much everyone that hears you tell these gets a kick out of it.
Oh, man, from childhood.
Yeah.
So that means since I was 19 when I got thrown in jail in Mexico, that one's off the chart. Yeah. Then we can't talk about that one.
No.
Does it have to do with hunting and fishing?
No, not really. I was probably just thinking of something with you and your uncles when you were younger.
Yeah. We need to have my uncles on this podcast someday.
And it would really be unfiltered then.
That would be so unfiltered. So Matthew has had the pleasure of growing up listening to my uncles, and they're almost like brothers more than they are uncles. My mom had 6 brothers in her family, and her youngest brother is only a year older than me. His name is Jim. We call him Jimmer. He was my college roommate, much to the demise of both of our educational paths. And then his next in line brother is Dave. We call him Boogs. He he was trouble. And in between there, I have a cousin that's 2 years older than me, Robin. So when we were in that terrible age of mischievous kids, like we were like 10, 9, 8, 7, or 5, 6, 7, 8. We did. I don't know. Did I ever tell the story on here about trying to blow up the train bridge?
I think it was on here. Yeah, I think you did.
I think we told that story one time about trying to blow up the train bridge in my little town of Big Falls, Minnesota. So we won't bore you with that one again. But everything we did growing up it was like the most Americana-ish, if that's a word, upbringing you could ask for. With a little town of 500 people, your parents threw you out of the house in the morning and said, "Don't come back until it's dark." And we had pocket knives and slingshots and BB guns and fishing rods, and that's just what we lived to do. It was so innocent. So you had so much freedom to go and just be a kid. And this one always cracks me up every time I see minnows. So those of you in northern Minnesota, you know that one of the big excitements when you were a kid was when you went fishing. And in northern Minnesota, live bait is like the king, the minnow. And we knew minnows right down to a fine science. The difference between a stickleback and a rainbow dace and a mud minnow and a shiner and a shad and a chub we knew we could look in the tank and tell you what species of minnow it was. We were that dialed into minnows. Well, this one always cracks me up whenever I see minnows is my grandpa, Jim and Boog's dad, my mom's dad, his life was about fishing. Every weekend he took us fishing, either open water fishing or ice fishing. Any of you who have ever fished Upper Red Lake in northern Minnesota know it's recovered now. There was a bleak time when it was not much. It had been overfished. But when I was growing up, it was the place where you went ice fishing. And if you could go there, we called it black ice or clear ice. It was the first ice of the year. You couldn't even drive out there. You had to walk. And when you came into Washgish, where the Tamarack River dumps into Upper Red Lake, on the right-hand side, it was called the Washgish Minnow Station. I mean, you think about that, a place called the Minnow Station? That's like every kid's dream. So we stopped there. We get minnows because we're going to go out. My grandpa's going to chisel holes in the ice, and we're going to be one of the first groups of people out there fishing walleyes in December when there's finally enough ice to walk out there. So then we stop at, I don't know, I think it was, what was that place there? Hillman's, I think is what it was called. Yeah, we stop at Hillman's. We buy some hot dogs or beans and weenies or something, and then a bottle of Bubble Up. It wasn't 7-Up. In northern Minnesota for a while, Bubble Up was like the big thing. So we split up all the gear. We pull up to the shoreline, and my grandpa's like, "All right, I'm going to head out there and start chiseling holes. Boog, you carry this. Jim, you carry that. Randy, you carry this." Well, I was in charge of carrying the food and the soda pop and my grandpa's beer. And Jim was in charge of carrying the minnows. And by the time we got organized and had everything done, and the last advice my grandpa told us as he started out ahead of us, because he was kind of checking the ice in advance to make sure it was thick enough, he said with a little colorful language, "Now, whatever you do, don't kill those minnows." And so being the kids we were of, I don't know, 7, 8, and 9 or whatever, we're like, yeah, whatever. So by the time we get all of our gear organized, Grandpa, he's already out there 400 or 500 yards chiseling holes. And on clear ice, you can take a run at it. And on first ice, you can slide for 50 yards without much of a run. And so that's what we were doing. We'd take off, and it's hard to get any traction, to get any speed going. But once you get some speed going, boy, with those little rubber boots that we had, you could slide for a long ways. And on first ice, there's never any snow on there. It's just like skating ice. So we're heading out there, and Jim, he just can't stand it. He's got to take another run at it. And as he's taking a run at it, he's holding on to this bucket of minnows, this white styrofoam bucket. And he falls, and when he falls, the minnow bucket tips all the water runs out, and the minnows are freezing to the ice. And he's like, Randy, get over here. And we're picking up these minnows off the frozen ice, and they're dying already because, instantly they're just like flash frozen. The ones we can, we're throwing them in the bucket, and we got nothing but about 3 inches of solid minnows in the bottom of the minnow bucket. And we can't get any water in there because it's froze. What are we going to do? So Jim, he went to school for petroleum engineering, which requires a lot of chemistry. You think he would have had some intuitive feeling that this wasn't a good idea, but he's like, give me that Bubble Up. So he opens up this liter bottle of Bubble Up, and he pours it in the minnow bucket, thinking that's going to keep the minnows alive until we get out there. And he puts the lid back on top of it. And instantly you can hear tonk, 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 almost like someone knocking on a door. And it's the minnows trying to get out of that bucket. And when we get out there, they're all dead, obviously. By the time we get there, their eyeballs are all bloodshot and they're bugged out of their head and they've lost all their color. And we pull up there and Jim kind of sets the minnow bucket next to my grandpa because he's getting all the rods and everything rigged up. And I still remember Grandpa opening the lid to the minnow bucket and looking at it, and his comment was a little more colorful than what the hell happened to the minnows. But that's a classic example of what we would do as we were kids. We just, it's just life. When you're a kid growing up in a place like that, you just, there's complete freedom. I almost feel bad for kids today growing up where everything is structured. You're not allowed to cut your finger with a pocket knife. You're not allowed to step on a rusty nail. You're not allowed to slide down the hill on a toboggan and hit a tree and maybe ring your bell a little bit. If it's raining, you got to come inside. You can't go pick night crawlers at night. Or if you caught a frog, you got to come in and put hydrogen peroxide on your hands to get rid of the germs. It's like, oh man, I don't know. Maybe we all just kind of live in the past, but I wouldn't have traded my upbringing for anything. It's especially with those guys, the one time, and I think you've heard about the one where Jim caught my dad in the crotch with the big daredevil.
Yep.
So, yeah, this was probably about the same time of our lives. We had a rule. We were like, as kids, we loved fishing bluegills because you could get a worm, hang the bait over the side of the boat. And we always had rowboats. We didn't have enough money for motorboats. And you could see the bluegill come and grab your worm. And that was like great fun. But we always envisioned ourselves as the great muskie and walleye fishermen. And we would go and pick night crawlers. And my grandparents owned a little country diner. And we had a bait station, if you want to call it that, where we'd sell night crawlers and minnows back behind my grandparents' country diner. And we'd take the money we made from that. And we had more fishing gear. Our tackle boxes were the envy of every adult in the community. But we had red-eye wigglers and, Johnson silver minnows and Dr. spoons. And I mean, if it was an elaborate, some great muskie lure or northern pike lure, we had it. But we were never really allowed to use them because there were always 5 or 6 people in a boat, and you don't want an 8-year-old casting his big Dr. spoon, big treble hook whizzing by everyone's head. So one time my dad, he decided he's going to take the 3 of us, me, Boog, and Jim, and then my younger sister, who's 3 years younger than me. He's going to take us to our family lake called Big Ole Lake. And he rows us across the bay, and my dad, he enjoyed his Pabst Blue Ribbon more than he should have. But he was leaned across the back of the boat, kind of half asleep. I don't know if he was like in his 6-pack sort of daze, and he's just kind of laying there. He's got his old gold cigarette kind of slowly burning in his mouth as he's relaxing. And Jim thinks my dad is asleep. And he switches his little bluegill lure to this big doctor spoon. Anyone who's ever seen a doctor spoon, it weighs like 4 ounces. You can throw that thing a mile. And Jim was convinced he was going to catch a big walleye out off the end of this down tree. And as he cocks back with he's casting, and that doctor spoon catches my dad. And so now we're talking like 1971. My dad's wearing like these pea green polyester pants. And when Jim goes back, he catches my dad right in the crotch, right in the left side of the inside of the thigh with that doctor spoon. And as he pulls forward, he sets the hook right in my dad's crotch. And my dad, I think, was so numb and surprised at first he didn't really say anything. And Jim, he thinks me or Boog have a hold of his line behind him. So he's giving it all these, just like a big samurai warrior trying to carve it through the air and get this line free. And all of a sudden, my dad comes to life because that hook has now penetrated the flesh on the inside of his thigh. And he stands up, and we're in this little 12-foot boat. So it's not a real sturdy situation. And when he stands up, he grabs Jim's line. I remember Boog and I looked back like, uh-oh, we're dead. This is the end of our lives. And as the boat starts wobbling and my dad's trying to catch his balance between having drank 5 or 6 beers and then the wobbling of this little boat, he falls back down. And now the other treble hook has him on the inside of his right thigh. And he is screaming and yelling. And Jim turns around like, uh-oh, I'm really dead. And if there's any purpose of having a cigarette, this was it. My dad takes the cigarette out of his mouth and burns the line and gets rid of the tension on the line. But now he's still got this hook with 2 of the 3 treble hooks on the inside of his thighs. So here's this 6'2", 220-pound guy trying to stand up in a 12-foot boat with 4 kids, trying to get himself undone. And what's going through my mind is, should I just jump out now? Even though I can't swim, maybe I should just jump out now and avoid the beating that I'm going to get. And so my dad ended up, somehow he had a pair of pliers in some place, and he cut the barbs off the hooks and then pulled them back out the way through they came. But it was an ugly, pretty sight. Not a pretty sight. It was an ugly sight. And now, as you get older, you laugh about that stuff. But it was such classic kids growing up, mischievous, just, oh, gosh. But, yeah. I'm sure everyone's thinking, well, did you get a beating, Randy? I got the worst beating of my life. And I probably didn't get as bad of a beating as Jim deserved. But it was that thing where all 3 of us boys got a beating. My sister, she got scot-free. But, oh man, we got whooped. And those of you who are my age, 50, you know that back in those days, you got a whooping. That's just how it was. And so it was things like that. And as quick as the tears dried and the snot stopped running down our nose, we were sitting in the back seat on the way home after we'd had our beating, and we're kind of looking at each other, and it's all we can do not to laugh. And I think that was the last time my dad ever took all 3 of us fishing together. But I know. Are those the kind of stories you're talking about, Matthew?
That's exactly what I was talking about.
Matthew's heard all of these, and when we go on trips, all of our guest hunters, they get to hear about some of this crazy upbringing I have. I think I'm on chapter 8 or 9 of my book about all these stories growing up, just like I'm on like chapter 9 or 10 of my elk hunting book. I need to take a year off and just finish some of these projects, but
too much outdoor TV to film.
Too much. And if people want to get some of these tidbits of stories, I occasionally post them out on Hunt Talk. I think out on my Facebook page, I pasted the story about blowing up the train bridge, or trying to. I think I put the story out there about getting knocked cold by Boyer Levacy when he run my head over with the bicycle. And if any of you go out to my personal Facebook page, I don't use it that much. I have the show Facebook page, Randy Newberg Hunter, and then I have my personal one. But if a lot of people say, Randy, what's that on your head in that little picture of you as a kid? Those are scabs 2 weeks after I got my head run over by Boyer Levacy, the biggest kid in town. He was only like 8 years old, but he's already 150 pounds. And he run me right over, knocked me out colder than a mackerel. And when all the other kids pulled me from the debris pile, I looked over when I kind of came to, and Boyer was sitting on the bank of the road crying his eyes out. He thought he'd killed me. And so how we survived that, I bet you most of you listening are saying, yeah, how did we survive childhood? I wonder if there's something in the makeup of growing up in small towns, having those kind of childhoods that make you a hunter, a fisher, a trapper, a whatever. And I don't know. There was nothing we weren't allowed to do. I mean, and when I mean that, we could go and start fires and cook our own lunches. We'd always make hobo dinners. We'd scrounge out of the garden or go get someone to have some leftover hamburger from the night before, and we'd make our own meals. And we thought it was fun to go and camp down in what we called the ravine when it was 20 below. That's how stupid we were, or how bored we were. I don't know, one or the other. Gosh, we did some stupid things. You know, when I watched that show, Ralphie, Christmas Story, and the kid puts his tongue on the flagpole. At least once a year in our school, someone got double dog dared to put their tongue on the flagpole. And Mrs. Olson would have to come out with a cup of water and pour it down the flagpole until it warmed up, however that works, until someone could pull their tongue off the flagpole. Always, every year. So when I see that, it's like, oh man, whoever wrote this story grew up in Big Falls, Minnesota. Excuse me.
But so. I think that's about all we have time for today. We'll be back in a few days.
I don't know. People probably don't want to hear all these stories. It was either that or marital advice.
Yeah.
And I'm just about out of marital advice, and looking at the schedule of how much I'm going to be gone this year, I might need some marital advice for any of you who want to give me some, because you're looking at the whiteboard over there also. You see that calendar?
Yeah, you're booked pretty full this year.
Yeah. So if any of you want to send flowers to my wife, candy, whatever, I'd be more than happy to reimburse you for that, because that woman puts up with more than any woman should put up with. But that's how this podcast, this TV show, this everything else all gets produced. So you're telling them, Matthew, that we have some topics for the next podcast, because one other thing is, even though we're trying to do podcasts for each of the episodes when we're out hunting this year, by the time we get a place where we can upload them and send them to the new editing group, get them loaded to the distribution platform and all that, it's going to be hard. So we're definitely going to be on an every other week schedule going forward. And so Matthew and I and a couple other people are trying to bang out some podcasts. We wrote down a big list of other topics. What was the other topic that we're saving? Is that the National Monument topic? Okay.
Yep.
Yeah. So be thinking about this, folks. The next podcast, go do your research on the Grand Canyon Watershed National Monument. And we're going to spend a lot of time talking about that and how some of these things that happen are the fuel that helps keep the fires burning for those people who want to get rid of your public lands. So I think that's a heads up, huh?
Yeah.
People can think about that.
Any last thoughts before we sign off?
My thought would be you need to go out to the shop and fix that wheel bearing on the boat trailer.
I'm not sure you have the right tools for that, but We'll see.
I get this sense that you're really not interested in
No.
changing that wheel bearing.
Not really.
I don't have any mechanical aptitude, so my wife has already told me I'm not allowed to do it. And maybe that's what we should get into to the next podcast. Also, we should add the topic of being a handyman or not being a handyman. I touched on that last summer, but I think it's worth a reminder that if you're a handyman, you're not going to get to hunt and fish as much as guys like me who are not a handyman. My theory is for every power tool that you own, you should cross off one weekend a year that would have otherwise been spent hunting and fishing. If you have a wood stove, right there goes 1 week of elk season. Gone. Never to be seen again. So let's put that on the list for the next podcast.
I think your theory is that if you try to be a handyman, you need to make it look as much like the Red Green Show as possible so that she never comes back and tells you to fix anything.
Right. When you were growing up, what was one of the shows I always watched? Red Green.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, is he still on TV?
I think
If not, he's got to be on YouTube or something.
I think a lot of the episodes are online, and I think Red does a solo comedy tour now.
Okay.
So
yeah, I mean, Red Green Show, that's advice to live by. I think we should I wish I knew the guy. I'd get him on a podcast. And I mean, he was a big influence in my upbringing. You don't want to be handy. I wanted to hunt and fish and do things. So being handy is not a good way to get into the depths of hunting and fishing. I don't care if it's handy mechanically, handy construction carpentry, handy with computers. Just don't be handy. Be an absolute klutz, be terrible at it, and your wife will just kind of give up on it and say, or maybe your husband, whatever it might be, your spouse will give up on the notion that you can fix anything, and then you can just hunt and fish. I'll use my brother as the example. I may have used him in the one podcast, is that he built his own house. He is like the handiest guy in the family. And I hunt way more than he does. He's never shot an elk because he's too damn handy. He's always fixing something. He's always this, he's always that. Not me. Those of you listening, and I think we got into the part of it also about you really got to set the tone right from the beginning. If you fake them out and act like you're handy when you're dating, that's the expectation you set once you get married. And you got to uphold that expectation, or it's going to be marriage under false pretenses, and they aren't going to go for that stuff. So those of you who are dating right now, find some example to demonstrate how bad you are at handyman things. You'll get to hunt and fish a lot more. I promise you. I absolutely promise you. So, well, Matthew, is that what they call a wrap?
I think so.
All right. Well, thanks for listening, folks. We're trying to bang out some more of these. We're trying to split topics up to make all of them have a little bit of substance to them. And like I said, the next one you're going to hear from us is going to talk about federal wildlife management versus state wildlife rights. We're going to talk about monuments, land management designations. And what you said, there was one other one.
Probably just more stories about Big Falls too.
No, we're cutting off the Big Falls stories.
No, we're gonna keep going on this whenever I'm on.
No, I feel like I'm on the spot, so I don't quite. And if I can't use my hands and everything, the story just doesn't come across on podcasts as good as it does in person. So
well, maybe I'll have to record it.
Well,
and
maybe
then we
that's
can do
it.
the
Maybe
video podcast.
That might be. Maybe we should bring Marcus over. Marcus is the camera guy. Maybe we'll do a video podcast. Because my buddy Brian at Gritty Bowman, and any of you who haven't been listening to Gritty Bowman, Brian is a great guy. Go listen to his podcast. He films them all. And it's somewhat, I guess some people would say, boring to watch guys sit there and talk. But when they get on a topic where one of the people get all wound up, that's when it's worth actually watching it. And so he puts them out on YouTube. And Maybe that's what we need to start doing with some of ours.
Maybe we make that one the exclusive storytelling podcast.